everyone, it's Lisa Ross, also known as Paper Daisy Creations, and today I'm going to show you how to work Judy's Magic Cast-On as a provisional cast-on. Now, I first learned that you could do this a year or two ago, and it kind of blew my mind because I use Judy's Magic Cast-On all the time for toe-up socks, but I never thought of using it as a provisional cast-on. And basically what we're doing is putting a set of stitches on one needle and a set of stitches on another needle, just like you would with a regular Judy's Magic Cast-On. And then one of the needles we're not going to use until we're ready for it. Those stitches are held provisionally. The other stitches will be our working stitches, and we'll be able to move forward. And the great thing about this is that when you are ready to use those stitches, they are already oriented either on another set of needles or on scrap yarn. So it's a really great method. So let's get started. All right, now I'm going to show you two methods of doing this. Now the easiest way is if you have interchangeable needles, meaning needles that screw off and can be replaced with stoppers. This is going to be the absolute easiest way to do it. However, you don't have to have these. I'm just going to show you this method in case you do have interchangeables because it works really well for this provisional cast-on. You can also do this cast-on using just one set of circular needles, putting the stitches on those two needles, and then moving those stitches that are held provisionally onto either a smaller needle or a different set of needles or scrap yarn. And then just picking those back up when you're ready to use them. So let me show you this method using the interchangeables because this is my favorite way to do it. Now, as far as judging how much of a yarn tail you'll need, that I can't really help with. It usually takes me a couple tries, and it's the same for me with long tail cast on. I'm not great at estimating how much yarn I'll need. But today I'm just going to cast on 10 stitches using this yarn tail. I'm going to take my yarn and loop it like this. So there's just the yarn going like that, and my two pincher fingers right here. I'm going to put those underneath that yarn tail, and then I hold the rest of the yarn with my other fingers like this. So sort of like how I would hold my yarn for a slingshot, like if I was doing a long tail cast on. I actually hold it that same way. For Judy's Magic Cast On, we're just going to do different things with that yarn. So let me show you that one more time. You want to take this loop of yarn right here. So it's not actually twisted, it's just a loop, and I'm going to put it over those two pincher fingers and then hold the yarns with my other fingers just so that I can tension it. So see how I've got this nice tension right here. I can make that small or I can make it large. I find it easiest to work it a little bit small, probably about 1.5 inches right there. Okay, next I've got my two needles and I'm going to hold these in my right hand, and I want the working needle to be held closest to my body. So that one is going to be my front needle, my working needle, and this one I've already put a stopper on it because I'm ready to have those stitches on hold. So I'm going to hold my needles like this. So the working needle is held closest to me, and then the needle that is going to hold my provisional stitches is held towards the back. So I've got front needle and back needle. All right, and I'm going to start by just sticking this yarn over the back needle. All right, so again, the back needle is where my provisional stitches will be held, and that's where I'm just resting that yarn. Now, I'm going to take turns putting stitches on each needle, and I'm going to do it by moving my hands, and it's going to take a little bit of practice if you haven't done this before, but once you get the hang of it, it goes really fast. And if you knit toe-up socks, you already know how to do this. All right, one thing I should mention is that this method of Judy's Magic Cast-On does not require you to untwist stitches. The original method did have you untwist your stitches. This method does not require that. All right, so I've got my slingshot. I'm putting that yarn on top of my back needle. And you can see how I'm holding these two needles together. I want there to be a little bit of a gap here, but I don't want it to be very wide. So I'm just kind of holding them with about, I don't know, ½ a centimeter of space in between them. And I'm going to turn the needles up. So I'm holding both of these needles and I'm pointing them up. And then I want this yarn to go over top of my front needle. So I do it like that. So let me show you that one more time. I turn the needles up, and then that needle kind of goes over the top of the yarn and then underneath it like so. And that is going to be my second stitch. So right now I've cast on 2 stitches. Okay, again, I need to hold these needles with just a little bit of space between them. I don't want there to be a whole lot of space, but I do need some. And I'm going to point these needles downward, and that yarn is going to go between the 2 needles and then over the top of the back needle. So I'm going to show you that one more time. So that yarn goes between the 2 needles and over the top of the back needle. And that makes stitch number 3. Now those 2 movements that I did, creating stitches 2 and 3, are all you have to do for creating Judy's Magic Cast-On. So I'm going to continue to make those stitches. So I point the needles up, and then I'm going to go over the front needle and in between the 2 needles like this. Then I point the needles down, and I start by making the yarn go between the 2 needles and over the top of the back needle. Point the needles up, go over the bottom needle and in between the 2 needles. Point the needles down, go in between and over the top of the back needle. And just continue doing this. You don't have to make big movements. In fact, once you get the hang of it, you can really just sort of twist your hands back and forth and make those stitches. All right, now I want to end on this bottom needle so that I have an equal set of stitches on both the top and the bottom. Now, depending on what pattern you're knitting, make sure that whatever number of stitches it tells you to cast on, that you have that on each needle. So for this one, I'm just doing an example. So I have I finished with my bottom needle, I finished with my front needle with that yarn right here. And you'll see I have that yarn tail. And what I'm going to do is just cross that yarn tail over the working yarn, and it'll snug into place with my first row. So for this first row, I'm going to be knitting these stitches. Remember that our front needle was going to be our working stitches. So these stitches on the back needle right here, those are going to be put on hold. Now, I like to work the first row before I do that because it secures that yarn tail, and then I don't have any issues. Now, because I'm using a second set of needles, I don't want to use this needle at all. So I'm just going to pull those stitches through. They're held on the cord, and I'm going to use my working needle to knit across these stitches. Now make sure that you have crossed your tail over your working yarn, so that you can secure that stitch or secure that yarn. So all I'm doing right now is working this first row according to my pattern. You can work according to whatever pattern you're using. Okay. Now I have my working stitches on the interchangeables with 2 needles, and these are my provisional stitches that are ready for whenever I need them. I can just twist the needle caps back on, and I will have them ready to use. What I'm going to do right now is take off this needle and put on this end cap. And that just keeps those stitches on hold. There's my provisional cast on. Those stitches are all ready to go, and I can continue with my working yarn, working the pattern until I need those stitches again. Now, what do you do if you only have one set of circular needles? No problem. You can use these 2 needles to do exactly what we just did, working Judy's Magic Cast On. So I'll show you what that looks like. All right, so once again, I've looped my yarn like this. Got a loop, just my yarn going like this. I put my 2 fingers, my index finger and my thumb together through that yarn, and then I'm just going to hold that yarn in place. I want to have that nice tension right here. That's my slingshot, like you would use for a long tail cast on, but I'm doing Judy's Magic Cast On. Now I'm going to hold these 2 needles. So this is all part of one circular needle, one set of circular needles. I'm going to hold these 2 needles just like I showed you before, keeping a little bit of distance in between the tips, but really like holding them together at their base. So they're sort of angled. And I begin with that yarn that's tensioned over the back needle, like this. Now in this set, we don't have a set of working needles yet because we only have one set of needles. So I have my back needle and my front needle, but I'm going to do that same thing. So I'm going to turn those 2 needles up, and then I'm going to go over top of this top yarn and underneath so that it comes between the 2 needles. And that's my first stitch. So let me show you that one more time. Point the needles up, and you want the yarn to go over the front needle and in between the 2, like so. Point the needles down, go between the 2 needles and over top of the back needle. That's stitch number 3. I'm going to point up, go over the front needle and between the 2. Then I'm going to point down and go between the 2 needles and over the top of the back needle. Let me show you that one more time. So point up, take the yarn that's tensioned on your index finger, and you're going to go on top of that front needle and in between the 2. Point the needles down and go between the 2 needles and up over the back needle. All right, I'm going to continue doing that movement until I have the number of stitches cast on that I need. So usually if a pattern will tell you how many you need, it's referring to the working stitches when you're using a provisional cast on. So if it says 49 stitches, we're going to do 49 on one needle and 49 on the other. All right, so at this point, all of my stitches are on one set of circular needles. Now I'm going to do the same thing where I cross that yarn tail over the working yarn because I need to secure it in place. And if you've worked Magic Loop, that's how we're going to work this first set of stitches. So what I'm doing right now, I'm going to be knitting the stitches that are held on the front needle. So I'm going to pull the back needle through those stitches until you have them on the cord, because I need to use this needle right now. I'm going to just work my first row in pattern. So for this one, I'm just going to knit across. Make sure that you did cross your yarn tail just so that you have it secured when you work these stitches. And you do need to have a longer set of circular needles. You would not be able to do this with like a 16-inch, at least not very easily. But this set is working just fine. So I've knit across, and this is what it looks like right now. So you can see my working yarn is attached now to this needle. These are my live stitches, and these are my provisional cast on stitches. And all I'm going to do right now is take those provisional cast on stitches and put them on scrap yarn. So you'll take a needle, you'll attach your scrap yarn, and you'll just transfer all of these stitches onto the scrap yarn, and they're held provisionally on that scrap yarn. When it comes time to use those stitches, just put them back on any set of needles, usually either the gauge needles that you used or a smaller set of needles, and you'll be ready to use those stitches. All right, so once again, this is using Judy's Magic Cast On as a provisional cast on. I've used that in this cowl design right here. These stitches right here were held with Judy's Magic Cast On, and then we gradually added them into the body of the cowl as we worked this way. And so it creates a faux seam right here, but it's really a very seamless, but the entire cowl is actually worked seamlessly just by using those provisional stitches. Thank you so much for joining me. My name is Lisa Ross. You can find all of my patterns on Ravelry.com or PaperDaisyCreations.com, and I wish you all very happy knitting.